Hello. Hola, buenos días. Welcome, bienvenidos. Thank you for joining us today at what we called a bonus session for our Transforming Engineering Education IEL Learning Hub. And my name is Savina Paluccio, and I'm the Executive Director of the International Coalition for Sustainable Infrastructure. And it is my pleasure to welcome everyone today for this session, which is going to be an interesting one because it's the first time that we host a project that is a live case study that we can learn from and hopefully can provide feedback to. And also, I understand this session will be in English and Spanish. So I want to make sure that everyone is able to actually follow what I'm saying, just in case. So maybe I can tell you, maybe I can ask my colleagues to skip to the slide where I explain how to put the translation on. And welcome everyone and thank you for joining us today. So that we are able to follow what we're saying when we're speaking in different languages. We can use the translating caption function on Zoom, and this is how you activate it. So you go down to the chat, select caption, you click on more, and then select caption, and then you need to enable the translation and select your own speaking language and select your own caption language. And just making sure, I'm going to say this in Spanish in case, tiene que seleccionar subtítulos, haz clic en más, activa la opción traducción, seleccione tu propio idioma y luego seleccione el idioma de los subtítulos. Esperemos que funcione. So now if I speak English, if you're activated your captions in Spanish, then you should be seeing instantaneous translation of what I'm saying in English, and you should be able to see in Spanish. Y cuando hablo español, los inglés hablantes, los que hablan inglés, te pueden ver la traducción de los subtítulos en su propio idioma. A ver si funciona. Have you tried? Have you tried and is that working for you? Yes. Okay. Sounds good. Great. Because this is important for everyone to be able to follow today's session. Great. Okay. So let me then go back to maybe a couple of slides. So what we are doing today is, as I said, a special session. We will have just a recap for the people who are joining us today for the first time. This is part of a series of presentation that is on the topic of transforming engineering education, and is part of an initiative that is called ISLE, Infrastructure Sustainability Learning, that where we partner with Duke University, colleagues are also on the line, and then also UN Environment Program and the Project ECHO. Over 3 months, we convened 7 sessions where all the different participants were able to share the learnings about transforming the engineering curricula. And we discussed a range of different topics. And we had a mix of people from academia, industry, from public sector. And so we came together to discuss challenges and to try and find solutions to the different topics. And so if we go next, and before we go to the next slide, today's session will be run as a quick intro from Rowan Palmer from the UN Environment Program. We have a presentation from Glenda on the El Salvador case study, and then we will use the rest of the time to have a discussion, and the discussion can be in people who are English speakers who can speak in English, hispanohablantes que pueden hablar en español. So we can do this hopefully seamless way to exchange views on this case study. So, and then we will close at top of the hour. At 4 o'clock, we ended the session. So 4 o'clock local time for me, which is London based, and for you is probably I don't know what actually El Salvador when's the time zone for El Salvador. These HIO sessions are designed to be very interactive. Please keep your cameras on if you can. Some of you already changed the name of your name so that we can see who you are. Please introduce yourselves in the chat and tell us where you're joining us from. And then we are also recording this session, and we will be made available to participants. We, at the end of our 7 months long, no, 3 months long, 7 convenience that we did previously, we collated all of the different things that we learned, and we are going to publish an output on transforming engineering education, and this will be made available to everyone. Hopefully, we can also add learnings from today's case study to be added to our output. So next, please, we've done the translation, the translated captions. And very briefly, we had a series of findings from the series that I'll just quickly go through. So engineering education is facing pressures to adapt to a rapidly changing and evolving professions and to societal expectations. So the efforts of transforming engineering education are constrained by several different barriers. And I'm sure, I've been seeing the materials that will be presented today, that Glenda will go into the details of what challenges you've already identified through your project. So I'm not going to dwell any deeper at this point. So transdisciplinarity is an important aspect of transforming engineering education, as we identified, and it needs to be rooted into system thinking. And I would also add probably critical thinking as a key cornerstone approach for future engineers to be dealing with the complex challenges that we are now asked to deal with. And it must begin quite early in developing within higher education. So the system thinking approach, the critical thinking, and the transdisciplinarity, all concepts that ideally should be embedded even before academic education, if possible. So we need to strengthen future engineers' ability to contribute effectively. And so therefore, we need to broaden the knowledge and skills in the engineering education. And this will require a number of different approaches, but also will require institutional support. So I'm sure that we will hear this from Glenda as well, but this is something that came up quite strongly as a finding that academic education is quite slow to adapt. There might be institutional inertia, and therefore this actually requires quite a systemic change, and it needs to be coordinated also across academia and industry. And something else that we found is coordinating also with the students. You know, the students that are joining the engineering education, they are actually they could be seen to be agent of change. So the younger generations want to be working in topics such as sustainability, resilience, ecological, nature positive or nature based approaches, and so incorporating ecosystems and social aspects a lot deeper than currently in engineering education. And also there is finally a clear scope for progress, because there are actually different academic institutions around the world have already started doing things within their own context and within their own constraints. So pockets of change and academic institutions that are trying something new are everywhere around the world. It's just we could scale up transformation, and we could go much faster if we were able to share our own experience, and we were able to share our own learning and develop models that can be scaled. And this was one of the things that we were trying to do with our discussions and webinar series, just getting people to share their own experience, learning what other people are doing around the world that could be adapted to their own context. So I'll stop here because you probably haven't actually joined to particularly learning from hearing from me speaking all the time. But recommendations that are emerging from our study are briefly on the slide, but a lot more detail is will be included in our outputs, and hopefully some more details will emerge in our discussion. But briefly, we need, when we're thinking about changing engineering curricula, we need to establish the foundations for the transformation. We need to build capacity of the faculty. So different faculty leadership, faculty staff. So the educators also need to be educated, I guess, or re-educated to be able to use new teaching approaches as well as new content, embed new learning approaches and curriculum redesign, strengthen partnership with industry communities, policy actors, and then create the structures to learn and to institutionalize the change. I'll stop because I said it already. I stop, and now I truly stop, and I hand it over to Rowan for some comments from your side. Over to you, Rowan.
Thanks very much, Savina, and apologies in advance because I think my computer is making some background noise, so I hope it's not too distracting. Thanks, Savina, for the introduction, and thanks to everyone for joining. Good morning, or good afternoon, good evening to everybody, depending where you are. Before we get into the El Salvador case study, I just wanted to provide a little bit of context for the work we're doing there. So this session is taking place as part of a UN Peace and Development Fund project that UNEP is implementing in El Salvador. And the goal of the project is to help strengthen El Salvador's capacity to plan and finance sustainable and resilient infrastructure projects, which is one of the priorities that they've identified in their UN Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework for the country. So for the project, we're working very closely with the government of El Salvador and with our implementing partner, GFLAC, who are here today and we'll hear from shortly. And so we're working with them to analyze the enabling environment for planning sustainable and resilient infrastructure, as well as for attracting investment to those types of infrastructure projects. And then we're also looking at the public finance side, so looking at the alignment of public infrastructure spending with sustainability and resilience objectives. And on that part, we're working closely with the Ministry of Finance there. And so part of this effort to look at the enabling environment, particularly on the planning side, we've been engaging a number of different institutions in El Salvador that are involved in training and educating infrastructure practitioners, so universities and professional associations, to see how sustainability and resilience can be better integrated into the relevant curricula. So this is very, very closely aligned or basically mirrors what the ISLE group has been looking at over the last few months at the end of last year. And so we wanted to have this special session to bring our Salvadorian stakeholders together with the international participants from the ISLE community and present the work that has been done so far in El Salvador and have an opportunity for feedback and discussion. So that's just a bit of context for everybody. I will hand over now to my colleague Glenda from GFLAC. She is the project manager from our implementing partner, and she's going to present on the work that they've done so far on this topic and present some of the preliminary findings, and then that will feed into the discussion. So thanks very much. And sorry, before I do that, I would also just like to say a huge thanks to Savina and Gemma and the team from ICSI for helping to facilitate and make this happen. So thanks very much, and looking forward to the rest of the session. So Glenda, over to you.
Thank you, Ron. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's been quite insightful to know the findings from the IELTS sessions, the past IELTS sessions. And thank you, Rowan, for giving us the context, because the education is one of the lines that we have been developing in this work for the project in El Salvador. And we are trying to be close enough to the principles of sustainable infrastructure from different perspectives, and education is key to continue with this work and to implement the roadmaps that we are going to have at the end of the project. And today, I will present how we are working to integrate sustainability into engineering and architecture education in El Salvador. And as said before, this is a part of a broader effort to strengthen sustainable infrastructure capacity in the country. And this case focuses specifically on curriculum reform as a systemic lever for long-term transformation. But we have many challenges and constraints, as Sabina said before. And we can continue with the next slide, please. So we have the case study overview here. And this initiative is led by the Group of Climate Finance for Latin America and the Caribbean, also known as GFLAC, in collaboration with UNEP. Of course, UNEP has been one of the they give us the guidance on the technical matters and the methodologies that we are applying. And with the government of El Salvador and the academia sector, in fact, we have some colleagues here from the academia from El Salvador. And the objective is not to simply update courses, but to address structural gaps in how future engineers and architects are trained, but also the practitioners from the government and different institutions that carry on activities related to infrastructure in the country. And we see higher education as a foundational entry point for enabling sustainable infrastructure systems in the long term, but we need to have like transformational focus, because there's no other way to only add courses or to only talk about sustainability as an isolated item, because it doesn't work. We can continue with the next slide, please. Okay, and Rowan gave us the background, but I'm going to comment that El Salvador faces 3 systemic constraints in sustainable infrastructure development. First one is sustainability is not fully integrated into infrastructure planning frameworks. The second is there are clear skills and knowledge gaps among policymakers and practitioners. And the third, public finance frameworks are not fully aligned with sustainable infrastructure objectives. In this case, the study focuses on the second constraint related to closing the skills gap through higher education reform. And if professionals are not trained to think systematically, to manage uncertainty, and to integrate resilience and inclusiveness into infrastructure design, policy ambition can translate into implementation. Yes, we can continue, please, Deba. Thank you. And now we have the description of the initiative. Specifically, we conducted a national assessment of engineering and architecture curricula across 42 universities, and we identified structural, pedagogical, and competency gaps. We benchmarked our findings against an international transformation model, the TEC 21. I am going to check broadly before, after, in the next slide. This is a model at Tech Monterrey from Mexico. And based on this, we developed the structure recommendations across 5 specific areas. The curriculum design, learning objectives and competences, teaching approaches, enabling institutional environment, and an implementation roadmap. And the ultimate goal is to institutionalize sustainable infrastructure competencies as a long-term systemic solution. Not only, as said before, and some more courses are talking about sustainability as a specific matter, and we need to mainstream the matters related to sustainability and the triple bottom line, not only about environmental issues, for example. We can continue, please. With the scope and approach from this case clinic, this deliverable builds on a previous diagnostic assessment and combines national findings with international frameworks and best practices, the TEC 21 specifically. And our methodology integrated national curriculum review, secondary research, inputs from the ISLE initiative, and the Engineering for One Planet Framework, EOP, that is an international initiative that defines the sustainability competencies engineers should have in the 21st century, and it promotes integrating the triple bottom line considerations across engineering education rather than treating sustainability as the isolated topic, as said before. And recommendations are structured to move from diagnosis to action, ensuring that reform is practical, staged, and visible within the Salvadoran context. We can continue, please. And this slide illustrates the pathway. We begin with the national curriculum assessment to understand how engineering and architecture programs currently integrate sustainability or not integrate sustainability. From there, we identify the structural and competency gaps, and we then benchmark against a systemic transformation case, the TEC 21. This is a model from the Tecnológico de Monterrey from Mexico, and this model is particularly relevant because it represents a full institutional transformation where sustainability, interdisciplinary collaboration, and real-world problem solving are embedded throughout the entire academic experience. Plus, students learn by solving real sustainability challenges posed by the government, communities, private sector, among others. And that informs a reform architecture covering curriculum, structure, competencies, pedagogy, and enabling conditions. And then we have the implementation roadmap with short, medium, and long-term actions. And it aims to go from pilot initiatives to full systemic integration. So we have in the short term university review and pilot sustainability related courses. In the medium term, we have sustainability competencies are integrated across the curriculum and partnerships with academia and government and private sector as well. In the long term, we have a structural principle of engineering educations supported by research and specialized postgraduate programs and this systemic change that we were talking about. And we have the diagnostic foundations. the National Curriculum Assessment, this National Review of Engineering Architecture Curricula, and the gaps that we already identified. We can continue, please, Dema. And then we have the top challenges of this implementation. Our assessment revealed 5 core implementation challenges related to the technical level, where sustainability is not structurally embedded in curricula and there is limited integration of climate adaptation, circular economy, and emerging technologies. And then we have programmatically, curricula are rigid, sustainability is often elective, and interdisciplinary integration is weak for now. Institutionally, there are few research centers focused on infrastructure sustainability, and laboratories are not explicitly oriented toward resilient construction and allied with the actual needs related to adaptation and the climate challenges from the category of loss and damage, for example, and decarbonization goals that the country have. And at the system level, there is weak linkage between academia, industry, and the public sector. And finally, there is a lack of standardized indicators to assess sustainability competencies, and graduate profiles do not fully reflect these skills. And there are not isolated issues. They reinforce one another in slow transformation. So now we can move forward the lessons learned, please.
Ay, no me lo cambiaron. Ah.
We identified 5 key lessons. The first one is that curriculum change is not about adding content. It requires restructuring learning and embedding sustainability across the entire academia trajectory. And the second one, technical excellence alone is insufficient, because engineers must be trained in systems thinking, uncertainty management, interdisciplinary collaboration, and translation across policy and finance domains. And third, benchmarking accelerates reform. Seeing a tangible transformation model such as Tech 21 makes systemic change feel possible and concrete, especially because this is from a Latin American country with a similar context, and it is very important to not be unrealistic with the reference that we take. And the fourth, faculty capacity is a critical leverage point. Without the structured teacher development and institutional support, reform remains only theoretical. And fifth, education reform must align with the broader infrastructure ecosystem. Skills development must connect to national priorities, industry needs, and finance frameworks. And of course, the needs related to climate change, especially those related to adaptation and loss and damage matters, because they are unpredictable, and there's a key lesson related to the importance of managing the uncertainty, because we don't know when this is going to be a disaster or a big loss of infrastructure. So it is necessary to plan the transformation in this way. And now we have some key questions. Maybe Sabina, let me know if you take the session from now.
Yeah, I can. Thank you, Glenda. And great presentation, and very clear presentation. Thank you so much. So there is a QR code on the slide. I'm sure you've done Menti surveys before. We also have a link in the chat for the Menti. So maybe if you prefer, you can check. So well done, Glenda, and maybe we postpone actually questions for you after let's do the Menti first, because the Menti survey will just get us warmed up, I guess, to provide feedback to you, and let's then ask the questions first, and then ask the questions to you afterwards, and we also have discussion questions to be used in the rest of the time today. So what we are asking you is how transferable is this case study to your institutional context? So this is just to see what people are thinking. I know I've noticed that actually quite a lot of people from our aisle joined. So thank you for joining us today from the UK, from the US, from Africa, South Africa. I've seen Vincent, you join us. We've got Julian from Chile. So we got a few of this. Sorry, you moved on before I could see the results, but maybe that's okay.
Sorry,
Maybe someone.
we changed the order, so we're starting from this one now.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. So if you could please answer this question instead, what is the one mistake to avoid in engineering curriculum reform? So Glenda has mentioned many possible challenges, the rigidity of the academic structure, the institutional inertia, the fact that there is a lack of capacity within the faculty staff, the fact that the curriculum is already quite packed, quite crowded. And so one of your lessons that you mentioned that was quite resonated with me was you could, you can't really completely restructure. We just need to be integrating. So let's see some answers here. What one mistake to avoid in engineering curriculum reform? So yes, rigidity, the curriculum, siloed learning. Yes, we want to avoid the kind of mechanistic siloed learning. We just not including industry input. I'm sure this comes from our industry participants that obviously have a very good point on how the industry really needs to be the source of the real world problems that then the students need to be dealing with in those kind of new learning approaches, challenge based and so forth. Not training educators on the reforms introduced. Yes. Non-job ready graduates, that's another another challenge is how do you reconciliate the graduate that the academia produces with the demands from industry and the market demands. Evitar copiar otro país. So this is like this is a comment about the contextualization. We want to learn from other countries, but we want to contextualize. That's probably why you went with the Mexican model that is closer probably to your context, and which makes sense. But there are other. I think you can also learn from other experiences for sure. Treating it as a separate topic, yes. You don't, no se considera todas las partes interesadas, which is, you don't take into account everyone, and it needs to be really you need to consider many different actors and parties in doing this kind of transformational and reformers. Yes, another comment on adapting to contextualizing rather than copying. Contextualization. So that's obviously something that is strongly felt in the audience. Maybe we can move to the next question so that we can leave a little bit of more time for discussion. If you were leading this reform, where would you start? Yeah, that's an interesting question. So the options are pilot programs in selected university. You could start from pilots. You could start from developing capacity of the faculty. Glenda, you said without the faculty capacity, nothing happens. Student-driven innovation programs. That's something that perhaps students are mostly interested in and would be more happier to engage with. Pilot program, no, it's moving, so I can't. Policy and accreditation alignment. It is important that there is an accreditation. I mean, the job market is looking for graduates and for that are formally accredited. So that is, I think, is quite important. Exactly. And then industry collaboration initiatives, as I said before, and strengthening that industry collaboration and really try and bringing in those real world problems, real world challenges. Okay, so far from people voting, policy and accreditation alignment. Absolutely, I think that's quite important. If engineers, I mean, this is a broad comment, but engineers may implement changes if there is an enabling environment that supports it. So otherwise, it's difficult for engineers to do this on their own. And then industry collaboration initiatives is also second, followed by pilot programs in selected universities. Next, I think we can move to the next question now. How transferable is this case study to your institutional context? And that we had already started voting on this one, whether it's highly, moderately, or requires significant adaptation or not easily transferable. This is actually probably speaking to the point of contextualization, no? How much can you learn from other case studies, and how much do you need to contextualize? I think this could be a good point for discussion. You know, how can you actually, what can you transfer, and what it needs to be absolutely contextualized. Right, moderately transferable. Okay, that's a good good point. You know, it's you find this that it is moderate transferable. I must say, Glenda, I mean, obviously we haven't seen the details of the benchmark and so forth, but everything you talked about is exactly the findings from our discussions and research. So surely there is a high degree of transferability in what you're finding. And hopefully, when you see the outputs and the details findings from our initiative, you'll find them useful for your context too. Next, please.
Yes, I would like to highlight one answer that I saw before about cultural heritage, cultural infrastructure, or cultural appropriation. I think it was something like that. It's because it is very relevant when we talk about the third category of climate action, that is loss and damage. It is classified as non-economic loss, but it is already part of climate talks in climate dialogues and processes from the UNFCCC. So it is important for us. And at the same time, I would like to point out that also there's a difference between the preparation for professionals from the universities or technical programs from the practitioners, because they are a sort of enablers from the institutions. And in this project, we have noticed that there's a need of a concept approach for them about, in first place, sustainability, but also about what is sustainable infrastructure. That it is not only about sustainable based solutions, it is not only about highways, it goes beyond. So we need to understand their needs as well, because they are as enablers as we help and support them. Because otherwise it is going to be difficult to implement the solutions. For example, we will have a roadmap on the sustainable infrastructure principles for El Salvador specifically. And the implementation depends on how open are the institutions to help to support the implementation of the roadmap. And the enabling environment, we all know here that is the principal ingredient for the sustainable infrastructure. So there's like relationship among everything, and practitioners and professionals, interdisciplinary focuses. So yes, I just wanted to point out in this point.
Thank you, Glenda. Yeah, absolutely. So they're all interconnected, and if you need to kind of make the changes, this is all parts of the system. I wanted to maybe ask participants whether they want to weigh in, having heard the case study from Glenda. So these are all the discussion questions, and rather than going one by one, I would request that just really hearing from you what you thought, and if you got any specific inputs into the questions that are, do you think these are universally applicable? What mechanisms have proven effective? It would be good probably to keep the questions on the screen, put my colleagues in the background so that people who are commenting, they remember what it is that they've been asked to do. So as we did for other webinars, we are also using a whiteboard, but I would actually encourage people to take the floor, tell us what you think. You can definitely contribute if you don't feel like picking open mic, I suppose, and contributing. You can definitely give us your input in the whiteboard to the questions that we're asking. So 4 questions. So are there lessons from this Salvador case study that are universally applicable? What mechanisms have proven effective in your context? And how might they apply to this case? And then if you scroll down, please, so I can see the other questions. What opportunities and challenges do you see in pursuing a curriculum reform at national level, like in this case study, as opposed to an institution by institution approach? And then finally, if you were advising our colleagues from El Salvador, what, in terms of what they could be, the single most important action they could take, what would that be in terms of having lasting impact? Please, if you want to take the floor, please do, in English and español, como queráis. Comments. Someone who wants to break the ice.
Sabina?
Yes. Hello. Liz. Oh, sorry. You probably had your hand up and I didn't see you. Sorry. Go on. Yes. Hello.
I'm willing to break the ice. I have a question for Glenda or anyone else. I was interested by the Monterey benchmark or template, and I'm wondering how the administration or the folks that you're pushing to incorporate this new, this effort, whether having an example from Monterey resonated well or whether it was seen as, well, that's not relevant here. Like, how powerful was it and how important was it to pick the right potential benchmark?
This is a question for you, Glenda.
After reviewing many cases across Latin America and the Caribbean, and thank you, Elizabeth, for the for the question. And after reviewing many cases across the region, we found out that there's like some relevant findings in the Tech of Monterrey, because they have applied also a sort of open innovation. There's someone with open mic. Gracias. There's like a sort of open innovation and living labs methodologies that they have that are very interesting, because there's a way of not only talking about including the academia or the interaction among academia and private sector and companies and public sector as well. So they have applied those like real life challenges in the curricula and the programs when the students are in their courses. So we thought that this is very relevant, because this is not that usual, at least in the region of Latin America and the Caribbean, because there's like a way to address the challenges in a different way and more appropriate with the local context. So we don't intend to replicate exactly this in El Salvador, because of course they have different needs. In fact, Monterrey is located geographically in a place very different from El Salvador. And El Salvador has different challenges, specifically because it belongs to Central America, which is a very, very vulnerable sub-region of Latin America. So there's like a replicable model that is not exactly what is happening in Monterrey, in Mexico, that it is like a replicable because of the fact that there's a methodology that already worked, and it can work locally if we apply that in El Salvador, because it is intended, and the open innovation by itself is intended to understand the immediate context.
Vincent, please.
Yes.
Thank you, Glenda.
Yes, thank you so much. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, go on.
Yes, thank you for the interesting study and the insights and the reforms or recommendations. I wanted to know whether there are some frameworks or some key competencies. You talked about competencies. What are some of the key core competencies and frameworks that you used in your study, if you used some? Thank you.
Some of the key competencies that we think that are crucial based on the research and information that we already gathered are those that are like soft skills or social analytical skills, because we also understand that infrastructure is not only about what we see, but for whom is the infrastructure designed. So some of the key skills or the skill set combines not only, for example, materials, sustainable based solutions, but at the same time, the understanding of this professional to have a perspective or lens to understand, for example, gender gaps or the distribution of the cities, how inclusive are them, or, the combination or a like a blended skill set to develop this technical understanding, but at the same time, for whom this is going to work or this is not going to work, and what are the constraints that we have right now. For example, the specialized intelligence for a city, or how close we are of having a gender inclusive city, or the infrastructure, how accessible is for the people and for the population or minorities, for example. So there's like a blended skill set that we are trying to promote.
Thank you, Glenda. It's good to see this point of inclusivity. I love this. You know, this is actually something that when we were doing our own conversations hasn't really come to the fore very much. You know, the inclusivity in designing the curriculum is a great point. More, I've seen that people have started populating the whiteboard, which is great, but it would be nice to have more people taking the floor if we can get some more comments on point of
Sí,
view. Yes. Hello.
hola, gracias Sabina.
Hola, ¿qué
Permíteme
tal?
que quizá
Sí,
cambiar a español por un ratito.
sí, sí,
Yo
por
soy
favor.
Ricardo Isea y también soy parte del equipo de Penuma, trabajo con Rowan y con Glenda coordinando este proyecto de parte de Penuma. Y quería, bueno, agradecer también a las instituciones académicas de El Salvador que se han unido y que están allí conectadas y participando. Y decir, bueno, que este estudio precisamente busca abrir una conversación con ustedes y tener sus perspectivas, ¿no? Sobre cómo ven los hallazgos, las recomendaciones y las lecciones aprendidas que había compartido Brenda. Así que si hay alguno de ustedes, de las distintas universidades o instituciones que quiera tomar el, el floor, bienvenidos. Y también, bueno, los comentarios por escrito también son bienvenidos. Así que, bueno, agradecer mucho la presentación, Glenda, la moderación, Sabina, Rowan, Gemma, todos. Y, en fin, invitar a los colegas a participar también. Ahí veo que hay un mensaje de Miguel, por ejemplo.
Sí.
Sí, gracias.
Sí, gracias Ricardo. Sí, Miguel, si quieres comentar un poco más sobre, ¿no? Respetando, que hay un mensaje bastante fuerte, ¿no? De la contextualización, de respetar la autonomía de las universidades. ¿Y me pueden comentar un poco más sobre este tema?
Hola, mi nombre es
Hola.
Miguel Rodríguez. Gracias por socializar los resultados de la investigación desde, desde los sectores profesionales, ¿verdad? Representados en los gremios de ingeniería y arquitectura. Vemos de muy buena forma que existan esfuerzos como el que esta mañana se está presentando. No obstante, por supuesto, respetando los hallazgos, las metodologías que han aplicado y la forma como están planteando los resultados, es aconsejable desde nuestra perspectiva, desde la visión profesional fuera de la academia, ¿verdad? En el ejercicio pleno de las profesiones, hacer algunas valoraciones. Y cuando hablamos de respetar la autonomía institucional, nos referimos a que tanto las universidades públicas como las universidades privadas tienen claramente definido su normativa, y, y es importante que se tome en consideración que algunos, digamos, algunos aportes que salen de la sociedad civil, aunque sean importantes, no necesariamente van a ser acatados por las universidades, ¿no? Dependerá mucho de la apertura y de la actitud también de las instancias superiores que dirigen a las instituciones académicas. Eh, Aunque el estudio es muy bueno, debería de considerarse en futuro como un insumo muy valioso para crear equipos multidisciplinarios que puedan de manera transversal poder consensuar algunos elementos claves para luego buscar los procesos de reformas curriculares que sean requeridas, ¿no? Porque cuando vemos los resultados es sumamente alentador ver que aunque no están los datos acá, que la Universidad de El Salvador tiene 9 de 10 o 90 de 100 puntos. Está bien avanzada en la contextualización de la sostenibilidad. Pero cuando sacas la media, estamos abajo del 50% como país. Entonces hay cosas ahí que valdría la pena darles como una mayor interpretación para poder hacer un planteamiento que en mi opinión debería de ser más consensuado. Desconozco a profundidad el nivel de participación que han tenido los referentes de la academia, pero hablar de 42 entidades analizadas, eso es una muestra sumamente representativa del quehacer académico del país. Eso es importante. Agradezco muchísimo la oportunidad que se nos da de participar y desde la Federación Salvadoreña de Asociaciones de Ingenieros y Arquitectos, pues inclusive estamos haciendo una propuesta de ley del ejercicio profesional que en uno de esos articulados considera que las universidades deben de emprender y de darle el abordaje que requiere la sostenibilidad. Lo mencionamos como un insumo que si a futuro puede ser de utilidad para quienes están dirigiendo estas investigaciones, con mucho gusto lo socializamos. Muchísimas gracias.
Muchas gracias por tu aportación, Miguel. Gracias. We are almost casi estamos al final de la sesión. ¿Hay alguien más que quiera decir algo de los participantes de Salvador? O yo?
Carla tiene la mano levantada, sí.
Ay,
Carla,
muchas
Carla, Carla,
gracias.
Carla,
Sí,
sí.
sí, sí.
Hola.
Bueno, hoy voy a hablar bien, hoy voy a hablar en español y despacito.
Sí, 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 sí. No.
En otras ocasiones he hablado en inglés más despacito también. Bueno, muchas gracias por la oportunidad. Definitivamente, en mi caso, que tuve la oportunidad de participar, ¿verdad? En el curso previo, realmente tenemos un gran reto, no solo aquí en El Salvador, sino que en América Latina, para poder activar y para poder hacer esta mejora sustancial de impartir nuestras carreras de ingeniería y de arquitectura. ¿Verdad? Coincido con el ingeniero Miguel Ángel en muchos de los puntos que él ha mencionado, pero yo escribí por ahí que me parece que es básico que nosotros promovamos el tema de la flexibilidad en nuestra currícula. Glenda hacía mención a los elementos eh, técnicos y hacía también, pues las carreras nuestras son básicamente prácticas. Entonces, también al interior de la currícula y al interior de la organización per se, desde el gobierno, desde nuestro ente regulador, tenemos de alguna forma que nosotros lograr flexibilizar el estudio de la ingeniería, pero y sobre todo en el que todas las instituciones de educación superior nos estamos alineando a temas de internacionalización, nos estamos alineando a que nuestras carreras, indistintamente de su área, estén enfocadas en temas de sostenibilidad. Este estudio que nos ha presentado Glenda y que han hecho pues en su organización, yo creo que es súper importante, ¿verdad? Y en el encaminado que tenemos, incluso en el proyecto de ley que tenemos de educación superior, hay muchos elementos que Glenda ha mencionado que deben ser reconsiderados o reapuntalados, porque definitivamente necesitamos que nuestra currícula sea más flexible que nuestro estudiante llegue y diga, ok, quiero estudiar ingeniería, quiero estudiar arquitectura, pero me gustaría combinarlo con este elemento, con este otro elemento. Entonces, en mi caso, que he tenido la oportunidad de participar, no solamente como miembro de la academia, sino que miembro también de ACIMEI, de FESIARA, y que he podido compartir y aprender con ustedes, creo yo que es importante que lo exportemos, ¿verdad? Y que si esto es aplicable o no es aplicable, sí es aplicable. Sí, solo sí, nuestro ente regulador también entra en el rollo de modernizarnos y hacerlo más inclusivo, ¿verdad? Habemos muy pocas mujeres ingenieras, habemos muy pocas mujeres arquitectas, por mi caso ingeniera, ¿verdad? Pero sí creo que vale la pena y podemos desarrollar un mejor país y alinearlo con todos los proyectos, ¿verdad? Que también tenemos de nación, que eso es importante y que está demandando mucho trabajo técnico, físico del área de la ingeniería y de la arquitectura. Muchísimas gracias, gracias Glenda, gracias Sabina por esta oportunidad y sobre todo por todo lo que he aprendido, ¿verdad? Y que espero que desde el papel que me toca jugar, ¿verdad? En la universidad y aportarle desde aquí a la academia, pues se pueda seguir creciendo. Así que muchísimas gracias.
Gracias, Carla. Qué bonito comentario. Am, no sé en qué idioma. Vuelvo al inglés. I think we are almost, in fact, I would say 3 minutes over the time that we've scheduled for this session. I see that there are many different inputs in the whiteboard, so we will send you for sure, all this, and we hope it's going to be useful. Maybe going back to the participants from both El Salvador and international participants. I guess we got just a very little time to just thank everyone for their time, for the contribution, for their participation. We will keep the whiteboard open, but we will also share this with you, and we will share the output from our previous meetings. Hopefully, it will be transferable. Yo creo que sí va a ser aplicable bastante el estudio que en las conversaciones, discusiones que tuvimos. Yo creo, Carla, que también, ¿no? Deciste ahora que aprendiste mucho. Yo espero que pueda ser útil. Vamos a compartir también el informe, los hallazgos. Y quizás más ejemplos para que quizás se puedan utilizar en El Salvador. I think there's always room for learning from everywhere, everyone. So I think, there's always helpful. And this is why, for all the difficulties, the technical difficulties, there was switching back Spanish and English. But I love that you all stayed with us. I love that you all, one way or another, hopefully we learned from each other, but also started to contribute. So I think this is really in itself quite innovative to try and be more inclusive and more also generous with the expertise that we all have, because this is the only way that we're really going to scale up transformation. So we are going to continue this conversation, and the community of practice was one of the mechanisms that we highlighted is what mechanisms are there that actually work. Building communities of practice where you can exchange views. I've seen also in the inputs there was mesas de diálogo, multidisciplinar, algo así, algo de continuar hablando, discutiendo sobre temas. So this is something that you can do in this community of practice. Please let us know if you want to keep in touch with us on this as we develop more community of practice on this topic. Follow us on LinkedIn, and then once again, thank you for participating today. We loved having you here, and we hope we could be useful to your case study. All the best.